Good morning, America! We have a very informative news broadcast coming up here for you. First, we will start with an informative interview about problems and then move into our live feed. Now to the interview.
Today I'm interviewing Mr. Upton Sinclair. Okay, what influenced your books the most in your life?
Well, I had wealthy maternal grandparents with whom I often stayed. This gave me an insight into how both the rich and poor lived. Living in the two social settings greatly influenced my writing.
Okay, how did your family lose their wealth?
We lost our wealth due to the distortions of the labor system during the Reconstruction era and an agricultural depression. We became broke.
What made you abandon politics?
After my loss to Miriam, I decided to return to writing and expose the techniques employed by his supporters in my book, I, Candidate for Governor, and How I Got Licked. I include Amy Semple's McPherson's because of how she heavily opposed the socialism and what idea of modernism.
What was your purpose for writing The Jungle?
My purpose for writing The Jungle was to set forth the breaking of human hearts by a system in which exploits the labor of men and women for profit. I aimed at the public's heart and accidentally hit the stomach.
Okay. Can you talk about your research for The Jungle?
I spent about 6 months investigating the Chicago meatpacking industry. I worked undercover in the plants, and I witnessed firsthand the unsanitary and inhumane conditions the workers suffered.
Thank you, Mrs.
Hello, I'm Stephen, and we are live in Washington as Congress decides whether or not to end child labor. Ever since the urbanization of America, many men, women, and children immigrated to the United States. However, these families struggle to support themselves due to extremely low wages. Because of this, many families end up having their own children work in order to feed themselves. By the end of the 19th century, 1 out of every 5 children ended up working in factories, mills, or mines. Not only did these children work up to 12 hours, but the conditions in which these children worked in were often filthy and dangerous. Because of these conditions, many children suffered from stunted physical and mental growth. Many of these children can't even attend school. Thankfully, by the late 1890s, many social reformers recognized the effects child labor had on children and urged states to pass legislation to end child labor. Their efforts worked as many states such as Illinois banned child labor. In 1902, Florence Kelley helped form the National Child Labor Committee. This would eventually lead to the federal government to create the U.S. Children's Bureau in 1912. This agency allowed federal agents to examine issues that regarded the health and safety of children. The fight to end child labor looked as if it was coming to an end in 1916, as Congress passed the Keating-Owens Act, which banned child labor. However, rumors speculate that the Supreme Court will determine whether or not this law is deemed unconstitutional.
Thank you to our special interviewer Legacy and Steven with the live feed. Next, we have our weather report for the week and a very special segment on the new Ford Model T. Now to Jeanette.
Now looking for a car to purchase? Look no further. Buy a Ford today because it is easier to handle and safer to drive. It is $680 and the cheapest car in the world to buy and maintain. The Ford is the strongest car, has 22 horsepower, and is also very beautiful. Get your Ford car today.
Today is February 23rd. So for today, there is a big chance of thunderstorms with a high of 55 and a low of 42. For Tuesday and Wednesday, it's going to be partially cloudy with a high of 62 on Tuesday and a low of 51. And for Wednesday, it's a high of 61 and a low of 59. For Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it will be mostly sunny. And then on Sunday, it'll be cloudy with a chance of...
There were successful ideas and unsuccessful ideas. The most successful was protecting social welfare. Many preachers began spreading word about the social gospel movement. This was the idea to relieve harsh, large-scale urban problems. Social gospel spread and caused the creation of multiple organizations such as the YMCA and the Salvation Army. The YMCA was founded by George Williams, who went through hard times as a young boy. The Salvation Army was formed by William Booth. Booth didn't intend to create an organization. He wanted to spread the word of Christ from church into the streets. This time period was when the settlement house movement came into play. These were large buildings that could house many immigrant families. They were most often found in immigrant neighborhoods. Americans also lived in these settlement houses but there were nowhere near as many American settlement houses and immigrant settlement houses. In most cases, the houses contained many different races and nationalities. So, an Italian family might have to live with a German family, or a Hispanic family might have to live with a Russian family. Many families disagreed with the mixing nationalities, but others didn't really mind due to the fact that there was nowhere else to live. Now the least effective was prohibition, promoting moral improvement. This was an attempt by the government and by protesting women to ban the manufacturing, transportation, and selling of alcohol in bars and saloons. Alcohol was proclaimed to be the largest contributor to domestic violence and abuse within the household. Organizations were created such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which became larger than intended due to Francis Willard spreading it from a small religious group into a powerful national organization. Women began protesting against alcohol, which caught the government's attention. This caused the government to create laws that stopped the production and selling of alcohol in bars and saloons, but Americans still found a way to obtain alcohol. Alcohol was still sold in bars and saloons secretly and under the table. Alcohol could be found within almost every household in America as well. There were multiple ways of obtaining alcohol, one being simply buying it from a bar or saloon. Another was there were underground clubs, known as speakeasies, open that the government and the protesters didn't know about. And lastly, some people knew how to produce their own alcoholic beverages, so they just created their own.
Well, that's it for tonight on this edition of American History News Broadcast. This is Eduardo signing off and wishing you all a wonderful night.